Secrets from a Coach. Thrive and maximise your potential in the evolving workplace. Your weekly podcast with Debbie Green of Wishfish and Laura Thompson-Staveley of Phenomenal Training.
Debs.
Law, you all right?
Yeah, how are you doing?
I'm doing all right, actually. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing really well. I am so looking forward to this focus, which is the third in our 4-part series, looking at start as you mean to go on. All of those intentions, thinking about employee engagement, because if you don't want to be here, then you're not going to be giving your best work. So engagement is such a hot topic. And we talked the last episode about how it's a two-way street, really. You know, behaviour breeds behaviour.
It does.
And then our focus for this particular episode is around team empowerment and delegation.
Yeah.
So, Debs, in the very fortunate position we have, we get to sniff around all the nooks and crannies in various organisations of different industries. And it is such a privilege to have those, offline chats with people, and particularly in your role as a coach, those real purposeful conversations. Here we are, start of a new year. How important is the element of a team feeling empowered, and what role does delegation have in that?
Oh, it is a massive topic, Laura, and I know we could probably carry on talking about this till, this time next year, basically. So it's so important because I think with the shift in how we now work, there has to be a level of even more empowerment for people. There has to be, I think, when you're working with an empowered team rather than what we would call a traditional team, you have increased levels of responsibility and authority over what people are working on. So they have a sense of autonomy that enables them to have levels of self-motivation. They can independently plan and manage their workload, and they can take full ownership for the decisions that they make. And the benefits of that is just huge, right? Because I think we need to think about how we maybe replace the traditional way of working of I'm going to tell you. And I know people are getting there at the moment with I'm going to give you authority to make decisions on your own. But I think sometimes when things don't go quite as well as they should, bosses, managers, leaders will sometimes get all over it, and they're like a rash over the work that they've given their teams to be doing. So I think it's that for any leaders, team leaders, supervisors, managers that are listening in today, I think it's that making sure you're evolving and adapting in the way that you approach work and the people within your team. So I think there's an element of being open to new ideas. I think we have to think about how do we actually develop others so they can learn and grow, because ultimately you're looking for your successor, I would hope. You would think about how can I set my team up for success and empower them so they've got the same amount of knowledge or they're learning from that, so that when they're ready to jump into a new role or be promoted, they're not going to be like a rabbit in the headlights and not have any idea about the traditional things, if you like, that we do when we're thinking about managing teams. So I think, we have to, managers, leaders, supervisors, whatever it might be, have to consider how do we develop others well. I think from that perspective, we have to be supportive as managers and trust our teams to deliver, providing we've communicated well, and making sure that we're giving, as always, what we always talk about, right, is recognition that person exists in your team. I think is really, really important, and creating that positive work environment. So whether your team are hybrid, in the office, not in the office, around the world, whatever it is, I think, the role has to be creating a positive work environment. You've got to want to turn up to work or work for somebody that is creating a space that enables you to thrive, right? So why would you not, as the leader, boss, manager, create that space for them? And I think when they give people authority or permission, however you want to call it, to crack on and do the work that they've been set to do, they feel more empowered. That person thinks, oh, actually, I can do, rather than, oh, I've got to check it with my boss first. That's not a great place to be, right?
Do you know, Debs, you were talking about setting people up for success, and just listening to you there, it's reminded me of, and we've talked talked about it a few times, but it is such a useful framework, I think, for anyone looking to either level up their management experience and expertise, or someone who's thinking about becoming a manager, or you want to manage your manager.
Yeah.
It's just a refresh of the situational leadership model.
Yeah. Yeah.
So this idea, as you said, of it sort of evolving and adapting. So whenever I kind of take people through it, I use the story of a plane journey.
Yeah.
So if you've got a bunch of passengers who just arrived on the plane, so this is your team, you've got either a new project or a new configuration of people, it's important that the pilot says, "Hi everyone, welcome, this is where we're going." So we're all kind of
So we know
checking
where
we're in
we're
the right
going.
place, you know where we're going. So that's quite a directing style. It doesn't mean you're bossing people around or being aggressive, but someone's got to fly the plane, and people have got to feel safe that the plane is being flown by someone who is happy to kind of take the controls. So the first stage of the situational leadership model, which was put together by Hershey and Blanchard number of decades ago, is the directing. Then there's almost like a moving back a little bit. It's like a little bit more space, and we've recalled that the mentoring style, haven't we? Which is, if you come to me with a bit of a problem, I'll give you my best advice, because on day 3 of a new role or a new project, just leaving you to fend for yourself actually might not be the most appropriate kind of leadership style. And then as the flight kind of takes off, you need a bit less and less kind of interaction. Otherwise, it can get a little bit kind of too much. So the third season of change in that situational leadership model is supporting. So if you come to me with a problem, we'll chat it through and we'll decide together. So more collaborative working. And then by the time I've got my feet under my table, or I kind of know what I'm doing, then actually if you come to me with a problem, it would be quite appropriate for the leadership style in that moment to say, well, what do you think? Let me know how I can support you. You are empowered to go off and do that because you know what you're doing. That's your domain. And Debs, I've had some really, really inspiring conversations. I've run lots of face-to-face workshops in the last couple of weeks, and just so many conversations with people, and leadership and how empowered I feel as someone in a team is such a hot topic now, because there's so much work to do. If everyone is waiting to be told what the vision is by someone right at the top of the organisation, you could be waiting a long time. And in the meantime, workload stacking up. So you've got to have those, everyone in the team really clear on what we're doing, where we're heading, and what's my role in all of that. And lots of inspiring stories you're hearing is where people are talk about actually having a manager that entrusted them and delegated them to get involved in something, talk up at meetings, represent the department at a catch-up. Actually, delegation is not a dirty word. D is not a dirty word. For many people, it's the leg up. It's the ladder that enables them to get a bit of visibility, stretch their comfort zone, and get their confidence back. Particularly if someone's kind of lost their nerve, or they've been working hybrid for so long that a face-to-face meeting might kind of panic them a little bit. So I think that evolving your leadership style, just viewing it as seasons of change, because it's a dynamic relationship like anything, because it's alive, and from an empowerment point of view, rather than delegation being seen as guilty of, oh God, I know I need to delegate more, it's why wouldn't I? How possessive to hold on to all the work, because no one person can do it all. That's why you have a team.
That's why, exactly. So why would you not use the team, I think? And that's something to consider. So when you're thinking around, as you said, our team still need to know, where are we heading? So what's the bigger picture? What's the goal? What's the vision, strategy? And then therefore, when you're giving them and delegating something for them to be involved in and empowering them to make the decision around it, as you said, it's not withholding information from them. So it might take you some time to set them up for success, but you've got to share the information as much as you can. That's, what's the finances that we've got to play around with? What are the key projects that we have to do that enables us to make this happen? What is the organisation objectives, the values that we're going to add as a result of this? So, and also I think looking at what the constraints could be. So it's not just saying, right, you've got X amount to spend and this is what I'm expecting, but also where some of those hurdles might come. And if you have an awareness of that as the leader, and you don't impart that onto your team, a member of the team or the individual that's going to be working on what you've asked them to do, then you're setting them up for failure. So having this quite open, transparent conversation of what I need you to do, and this is the reason why, can actually help somebody do it. And these are the things that, in my experience, so it goes back to what you said in the situational leadership model, the mentor role. In my experience, this is what I've learned from my mistakes, but it's okay because I've been through it and I now understand it more. So I think we need to make sure that to feel empowered in that state, we need to support the team, give them regular feedback, have one-to-ones, don't just dump a job on them and leave them until the deadline's like a minute away and you are asking them and they haven't delivered what you've been asked them to deliver. So I think it's a lot of communication comes into it, and being visible and making sure that we are giving people time and space to be able to ask questions, make the mistake and know that it's okay. But I think it starts with making sure that we define the task that we're expecting people to do so they know why they're working on something and what the impact is.
Excellent. Right. Let's do a real deep dive on some practical tips.
Mm-hmm.
First off, we'll have a look at if you are a manager or a wannabe manager, or is on your radar now or in the future, let's have a look at some tips that can help empower a team and delegate. And then let's have a look at if you are someone that wants to be empowered and you want to be delegated to more because, you're going to enjoy that or you think that's going to be useful for you in your career, we'll look at some tips how to ask for that.
Nice.
So Debs,
go on.
Between us, what are our thoughts around what can get in the way of a manager who wants to be the best manager they can, but is finding it a bit of a challenge to delegate, and therefore that can impact the sense of empowerment within their team? So what gets in the way? And then we'll have a look at some enablers.
Oh, I think, well, always for me, the biggest one is their ego. They want to be seen to be the person that's done all the work. But as you said earlier, it's not just one person's job. We all have to work collaboratively to achieve the end goal, whatever that is. So one person can't do it on their own. And I think also it's when that manager is deciding that something's not quite right, so let me fall all over it and micromanage what's going on. So they will normally lack of communication. They withhold information for some reason. I don't know if that's a power struggle. The more knowledge I have, the more powerful I am, which I think is an old myth, but I've heard it over years and years and years. And knowledge is power, right? And therefore I'm holding on to it because I don't want you to have the power over me. That is such an old-fashioned way of thinking. And I'm sure I've come across managers that still believe that. And we try and help them with some questions to ask of themselves before they're all over it and take the control back. And therefore it just gets stuck. It's like you just blocked a big hole because you haven't let your team explore and navigate their way through what you're expecting them to do. So for me, it's always their ego gets in the way.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I think as well, if you are a relatively new manager or you're in a new set of circumstances, I think there's also fear from overburdening your team.
True.
So almost, taking on the burden so that my team, to protect my team, which means you get a bit of a squished manager who is less inclined to be energized and positive and have one-to-ones with their teams. They're so knackered. So it becomes a bit of a, an own goal, over time. I think there's also fear of a team member not being able to do it as well as the manager. So worrying about those kind of, sort of pressures. So many people, I think, for the first time in quite a while, are now putting in internal training programs to skill up their team. Just as a quick aside for those who like practical tips, EDIP is the way the army do it.
Yeah.
So it's one of the quickest ways to structure a 20-minute chat rather than just a download of information that the other person might be a bit kind of dazed by. You explain it, you demonstrate it, you give them a chance to imitate it, and then set them up to be able to put it into practice. Explain, demonstrate, imitate, practice. And it's a really handy way to convert a half an hour catch up with someone to set your team up to be able to do a task that is going to be part of their new responsibility rather than a random conversation. It makes it a bit more purposeful. And of course, converting it into the end. So what's your key takeaway from this conversation? How can I help you? What, how and when can just then ensure that is a purposeful conversation rather than it being a bit kind of haphazard. And that could be just walking along a corridor together. You don't need to have a training room set up and all this kind of rigmarole and resources. It's just the exchange of communication. So that can then help from a fear point of view. If you're worried about the quality of that task being done, is get some training in, get a bit of kind of talk time. So I think there are quite a few kind of barriers, but there's a reality here, Debs. There's too much work for one manager to do when there are lots of people that might be part of that team that want to do it or a better place to do it.
And I think you're right, Laura, because if you go way back when, and I always have this picture in my head, the manager managed the people, whereas now the manager manages the people and the tasks. And actually, it's really interesting. And obviously, with overtime cuts and cutbacks and everything, that's been going on in the whole world of work, I suppose that's a very top level, quick and dirty explanation of it. But I remember a time when if you had the title of manager, you managed the people to deliver the task. Yes, you set the tone and everything else, but you didn't necessarily do because you relied on your team. You trusted your team.
And you had a secretary.
And you had a PA,
all that
secretary.
Admin would have been done.
Yeah, exactly. Whereas now, it's all down to the manager. So as you were saying, if you're a brand new manager and you think, oh my God, I should protect my team and not give them all of the crazy jobs that I'm being asked to do, then again, you're stopping an opportunity to learn and develop. So I think confidence as a manager is really important. So knowing that actually if you're stepping up into a role and you're suddenly going to manage a team, yet you've still got your tasks to do, then that's a conversation with your boss to, if you like, recontract, reestablish, how are we going to work around here now that I've been promoted? What do you expect from me? But also, what do you expect from my team? So there's there's clarity, I suppose, around having that conversation. And that could be quite a courageous one to have. But don't just assume that you've stepped into the manager's role and you're not really sure what's expected of you. So know what's expected of you, reestablish, recontract with your boss, because then you can recontract with your team as to what's going on and make the agreement. Is there training that's needed? But the time it takes. So if we can delegate well, then we're not caught up as managers having to do everything and working stupid hours and getting burnt out, right?
Yeah. I mean, there's such a clear link between stress and levels of wellness, your time management, and delegation as the enabler for that. So there are, I'm sure, hundreds of thousands of people in leadership positions, whatever stage, in the part in an organisation, who this year are thinking, I know I need to delegate more. And I guess there are two steps that, just from a practical point of view, this is something that I've nabbed from the American Association of Nursing.
Oh, tell me more, Law.
It looks at the rights of delegation. So is this the right person? Is this the right skill set? Is there the right level of authority? Is this the right opportunity? And is there the right kind of governance in place? So that you're not setting someone up for something that could, really backfire, and in some scenarios could be, life or death situations. So where is it appropriate? Is it the right person? So that's taken from the nursing world of, you wouldn't put someone on day one in charge of something unless, there was those kind of right circumstances. And the STAR principle can be useful to then think, okay, well, I've selected my person or my people. I've got someone in mind that I think would be the right person to be able to sit in and represent our team at that meeting, rather than always being me. If you're so busy with meetings, there's just not enough of you to go around. So delegating that authority to attend meetings on your behalf might be an absolute game changer in terms of time management. And this is where the STAR principle can be useful. So the STAR principle has got 2 R's in it: skills, time, authority, responsibility, recognition. So what do I need to do to set this person up with the skills to be able to do that? Have they got the time to be able to do that? So is it realistic? Have they got the authority, or do I need to give them the authority, or do I need to generate the authority for that person to do what they need to do in that role? Have they? What is the level of responsibility they have here? So who owns that? What's the responsibility? And how am I going to recognise them? So it doesn't feel that that person is being used to make me look good. And actually, the most effective, successful managers are the ones that are there behind the scenes, making superstars of their teams, aren't they? Because at some point, people will say, "Wow, that team's generating a lot of, internal promotions. Who's their manager?" Because that is the person that's enabling that. So rather than, as you said, with the ego, you always being the one on stage with the performance, actually the real person who is enabling that success is the one clapping for their team members on, behind the scenes that they've then set up.
Yeah. So you're leading from behind, really, not from the front, which is like, and it's easy for us to say. And I always get pushback in coaching to say, yeah, well, that's all right. But in practice, that doesn't happen. So the challenge they're thinking around that to say, what stops you from doing that? And it's a really interesting question to ask people that want to be seen to be leading from the front. They want to take the glory for the team's effort. Yes, they might stand up on a stage and go, I'd like to thank my team. Too late. You shouldn't be doing that. It's that bit that says, what stops you from doing that? And it's really interesting, the responses you get when people go, oh, I've not really thought about it. Normally the response sometimes I get is, well, I want to show my boss that I'm valued and I'm worth the money they're paying me for. I said, wow, that's crazy, because they've already employed you. They already know what you're getting paid. So there is already an expectation on you to get the team to deliver while you focus on the strategic bit or whatever it is your role is, so that you are managing the team well. It's not about you standing front and center and going, look at me, aren't I fabulous? But a lot of that is confidence. As you said, it's fear. As you mentioned earlier, it's not being really clear on what my role is. So the self-awareness of, who am I as a manager? How do I want to be perceived? What's going to get in the way of me doing that, I think, is really important. And wanting to manage, I think that's the other thing. If you empower your team, you genuinely even want that person to be the best version of themselves that they can be, because you are. So only because you've done some work on you. So you're leading from behind, not from dragging everybody with you from the front.
I think you're spot on, and I think I know we're about to look at, well, what might that mean for someone who is desperate to have more empowerment and desperate to get a go. But I remember something from the very first training role I had, working in a huge recruitment business, and it was almost a little bit of a commercial / incentive research project, really, because the different recruitment companies within that massive organisation did their incentives in a slightly different way. So some of the brands had a billing manager, so a manager who's responsible for bringing in their own revenue, as well as taking a bit of a cut from their teams. You then had some other brands where the manager didn't bill. All they were there to do was to support and develop and guide their teams to bill. And what was fascinating, Debs, is time in, time out, the overall level of revenue generated was much higher in those brands where there was a non-billing manager. Because what it sort of created a sense of is the manager is almost competing for success with their team.
Of course.
So let's just kind of use simple figures. If you've got one high-achieving billing manager bringing in 100 grand a week or a month or whatever, you've got 10 members of the team who aren't particularly motivated, who are bringing in 10 grand. Well, that gives you, 180 grand. If you've got a non-billing manager who is electrifying their team, they feel so buzzed up and motivated, each bringing in 50, you've got 400 grand.
Yeah.
So it was quite interesting looking at the real world impact of when you have a manager who has the time and has the focus, the good ones, there were always kind of, managers who weren't necessarily, as brilliant as they could be, but you get more combined service levels or bottom line figures coming in with the team performing, not just one superstar manager being supported by their team.
Yeah, and I think, and that's so, when you look at it from that aspect, isn't it? The pressure is off you to compete. It's the competitiveness, isn't it? And the comparison that we sometimes adopt because somebody over there is doing more than I am and I want to be seen to be doing it and value. Oh my God, it just gets so caught up. And I think that's the bit where we can stop and just ask ourselves some questions, around, do I need to be involved, as you said, or present in that discussion that's being had? Or can I give autonomy to that member of my team to go and represent the team. So I think that's, as you said earlier, I think that is such an empowering thing to do, is delegate that responsibility or autonomy to that person. Asking yourself, have I been too overpowering? So are there times when I could have just backed off and just been there in that supporter role, which you mentioned earlier? And also, could I have left Joanne Bloggs to make that decision? And did I really need to be involved in the decision? So could I have trusted them? And I think recognizing that we all work so differently, we all bring different things to it, and that not everybody will have the same way of working that you do. But that's a good thing. Otherwise, that's when the robots come in, right, Laura? So
too right. We're not human algorithms.
No, exactly. So if we can give people the freedom, I suppose, to make decisions, knowing that they've got your support, but making the decision because they're aware of the importance of the things that are going on around them, like what's needed, what's the end goal, what are we looking at? So they have all the information to hand in order for them to do that. Love
it, Debs. Okay, let's really quickly do a light touch on, so let's say someone's listening here and thinking, all right, well, that sounds wonderful, but unfortunately, my boss is a bit of a sociopath. So I need to do some extreme.
Get out now.
Yeah. So you've got a choice to stay. You always, and that's the first step of empowerment, isn't it? And I know you're right on one for this, Debs. We always have a choice.
We always have a choice.
If your choice for whatever reason is, actually, I'm going to stay in my role, but I want to flex and level up a little bit with what I can, let's have a look at some real quick little takeaways that can help empower yourself and look for opportunities to be delegated to.
So go on then, Laura. What are you thinking? So what's your initial thought?
My initial thoughts are, I've seen over the years, I think there is a lurking myth that you have to be a certain level, or you have to have been in an organisation for a certain amount of time before you can speak up, have a voice and put some suggestions forward. And I think you always have a voice. I mean, it's one of my kind of big sort of passions. And it's been interesting to see in lots of industries, there are lots of speak up forums that are popping up, whether that's whistleblowing, whether that is a general principle of see it, own it, do it, and kind of speak up and whistleblow. So that, how do I empower myself, I think is a really hot topic. Out of interest, I think one of the key premium skills for this decade, Debs, is going to be, how do people empower themselves to raise problems, call the alarm and say, I don't think it's working, I think we need to change tack, without looking like you're the problem person, without developing a reputation for yourself that you are the blocker to change. Actually, that fab idea you've got could be the enabler to progress, because change is inevitable. Progress is optional. It's the progress that requires that kind of team effort to really want to do something to make something better. So I think just first off, reminding yourself there's you have a voice and no one else will see something and say it in a way that you then can. Part of our role is to do what we can to either solve problems or make things better. So although you might be out of practice or you might not see colleagues doing that, actually those people that are able to empower themselves, speak up and bring out a point in a positive, change orientated way, I think are going to be really useful. So how do you manage your boss in a way that means you can speak up, you can put that point forward? And I think that's where it really comes down to that communication bit. So really kind of making it clear that this point you're raising is for the good of the team, the manager, the organisation.
And I think for me, it starts with self. So it's thinking about, have I got a positive attitude? Have I got an optimistic outlook? How do I show up every day? Do I show up with the right intent to want to work? I think that's really important. Being able to set yourself some reasonable goals. So knowing what your development plan is, knowing what you can do to improve every day. So what does that look like? And having that regular review for yourself can help you, if you like, guide the conversations in a team meeting. being able to have people around you that may be similar, that are also very enthusiastic about what they're doing. They want to work here. As we know, nobody joins an organization to do a bad job, right? So if that's the bit that we're starting on, people are engaged and motivated to want to work here and do the job and be the best they can. So that's going to empower me to speak up, because my intent, if I'm going to challenge a decision or I want to raise my thoughts around it, the intent is to make it better than it was a moment ago. So knowing that, so help me understand, I'd like to share my observations. They're all little catchphrases that we can put into a conversation to enable a great conversation to take place around the table. It does help if you have a good manager that encourages that free talk and enable people to do that. I think the other thing for people to feel that they're empowered to speak up is to use positive language. I think that's really important, that people are not the moany, groany, oh, it's never going to work around here. It may not be working around here, but the language we're using to demonstrate that can make a huge difference to the impact that has on the team. Knowing your values, knowing your worth, if you like, being assertive in the way you're communicating, and being clean, as I always call it, in the way that you communicate, I think is really important. And not be afraid to have those conversations, because you're being employed for a reason. If you were employed to share your ideas and challenge and disrupt the current state of the affairs of what's going in that company, remind yourself of that.
Love it. And a final real practical little kind of tip is, I guess it's a bit of empathy that, you and your manager might not have the best working relationship, but how do you sort of set up that your manager rather than sort of stitch your manager up? So if blurting out at the next team meeting, actually, I've got a suggestion I want to make, then you might get a bit of a blunt or a not great reply back, because there might not be time set aside for that. Yeah. It might be kind of a bit of a surprise out of the blue. So that emotional intelligence is key to that with communication. So dropping a little email a week in advance. I know we've got a team meeting next week. I wonder if we could put some time aside, because I've got some ideas I think might be useful. So then your manager is set up rather than potentially stitched up in that moment.
Exactly. Yeah.
You might not get the response you want, which then means, you learn a lesson at that point, as does everyone else. And then it means everyone just carries on keeping quiet. Yeah. And Debs, if everyone keeps quiet, how can we make stuff better?
No, it just doesn't. And then that's when the negativity comes in and you get a disengaged team and it's just dysfunctional and it all goes to pot. So I think, if I was, not a good place to be, right? Not a good place to be. So I think if I was to give people something to consider as a call to action, I think making sure that to feel empowered and to show that actually I am a valued member of this team and I genuinely want to contribute for the greater good, which is whatever the organizational goals are. I think, change your negative talk to more positive, optimistic. And I would, if I'm given an action, I would say, take that action and make sure you finish it. And don't just leave it hanging because it was too difficult or nobody supported me. Speak up, ask, you want me to do X. I've got so far with X and I'm a bit stuck. Can you help me? So being able to reach out and connect with others. So building relationships around you, surround yourself with good people.
Love it. My share the secret would be, think of someone in your personal professional network who is really looking to free up some time in their day-to-day through delegation, or knows that they've got a bit of a team morale issue going on at the moment, and actually you think empowerment's going to be the way. Get them to listen to this. It's not about making it complicated. It's about sometimes having a little moment of reflection, doing a current state analysis. Where are we at now? Yeah. A future goal state. Where do I want to get to? And the journey can begin. But you've got to have that first step to know that there is a next step you can then take. So that would be my share the secret.
Definitely. Love that, Law.
So Debs, here we are at the wrap up of our third one.
I know.
Very excited about our next week's one, where we're going to be looking at the role of vision. And actually, to have a clear vision, you've got to get some visibility. Because if no one knows who you are and you don't know who they are, how can you have an idea as to where you're going to go next? It's just a shot in the dark. And I know we're going to be joined by the fabulous Krupa, who is someone from your network. So really looking forward to that. In the meantime, Debs, have a gorgeous week.
You too. Feel empowered. Know that
I
you
am.
are.
I am so empowered. Thank you so much. I'm raring to go, empowered and delegated. So
Love
have a
it.
fabulous week. Love you lots.
Love you too. Bye.
Bye.